Welcome to ACX University. I'm Scott Jacoby, and today's episode is How to Talk So Customers Listen. I'm here with members of the Audible editorial and social media team to help you understand what we understand about listeners and how to speak to them compellingly about your audiobooks. To my right is Courtney Reimer.
Hi.
Robin Fink.
Hi.
And Christina Harkar.
Hello.
And we're just going to jump right into it by learning a little bit about the Audible editorial and social teams and what your roles are on them. So Courtney, starting with you, what is the Audible editorial team? What do you do?
So the editorial team is comprised of a bunch of subject matter experts around listening and particular genres of listening. So we try to speak to you from our area of expertise about a particular genre or a particular type of listen, be it short form, long form, true crime, mysteries and thrillers, memoir. So we have a group of people who have a very distinct point of view, and they try to, when they talk to you through newsletters or curated lists, or videos like this one sometimes, they will tell you, here's what I like, and if you're like me, or you have similar taste to me, here's why you might like it too.
Gotcha. And so this takes place on Audible or sometimes on pushing to Audible's social media accounts, is that right?
We do what I call content about content. So whether it be in a newsletter or we do work in partnership with Robin, which you're about to hear more about. We interview authors sometimes. We do these videos where we talk about book recommendations. So you can find it on all of our surfaces, both online and on social.
Beautiful. And before we jump to Robin, what is it that you do on the editorial team? What is your role?
I'm director of editorial, so I oversee some of the sausage making of getting that content to our customers and our listeners. I also produce a podcast called Addicted, which is the editors doing that kind of conversation in what feels like an organic way about a particular genre or a crop of new releases that they're excited about.
So that was our first little bit of advice on how to work something in that you're excited about listening to. You just snuck it right in there. Go check out Addicted.
Yeah,
you're
please.
excited about it. Thanks a lot, Courtney. Very nice. Moving over to Robin now, you work on the Audible social media team. Tell me a little bit about that and how that interacts with the editorial team.
Sure. We have two goals on the social team, and that is to build community and help our listeners find their next great title to listen to. So the first half of that is really community building, connecting with people, having conversations with them where they are, which for the Audible Organic Social team is Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We have a great community of listeners. It's a great place for our listeners to find and talk to each other. And then once we've built up that community and that brand loyalty and that trust, then we can use the brand handle to recommend titles to our listeners. We work really closely with the editorial team. They do content about content. We do the content about the content about the content. We like to cut down the videos and the interviews that they do into bite-sized pieces to entice people to visit us on audible.com, whether it's taking a line from an interview or a clip from an Addicted episode or a behind the scenes video thing, and then we do just the taste of it on social and entice them to come back to the website for more.
Great, thanks. So Christina, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Moving back over to the editorial team, can you tell me about what your role is and what you do?
Yes, I'm the Senior Director of Editorial Projects, which is a content-free title that means I work with content. So my team is adjacent to the editorial voice team that Courtney runs, and we're responsible for special experiments that if they work, they become part of business as usual, and if they don't work, no one ever needs to hear from them again.
Great, thanks, Christina. So I want to get into the goals of your teams and what you do at Audible, but it's interesting. I feel like I'm noticing that while the end goal is surely to sell more audiobooks for Audible, nobody really said my role is to sell audiobooks. How do you get from what you're describing to that end goal? How do you do that?
So we think it's important to build a relationship that's very trusting with the listener, in so much as we're not there, right, to just say, spend your credit on this. We're there to say, hey, we know there's a lot here. Here are the ones we like, and here's why. Feel free to choose from this. And we feel that that will be a better way for people to continue listening, is to have that sort of, oh, I know Courtney likes to listen to self-development. So whenever I see her little porthole photo on the site, I'm going to go and see what she's recommending to me that day. So it's sort of like a hand holding that's like, I like to say that our team is your smartest best friend, who is there to help you with your Audible experience and your choosing of your next listen.
Yeah, and to that point, social media, what's great about social media, it's a two-way conversation. These guys write some great newsletters and they go out, but they don't always hear back from people. What's great about social is we can sort of take that same content, put it out, and we can hear directly back from our listeners. So we can hear what it is they're looking for. You can tweet at the Audible handle day or night and say, hey, I have a credit, I don't know what to spend it on, can you please help? We will amplify that to our audience, or we'll tap in an expert on the editorial team to help find the right listen for the right person. So it's not just about selling titles, it's about matching the listener with the audiobook that they cannot pause, that they are just dying to listen to all the time, that they want to have their earbuds in 24 hours and have like a life-changing listening experience. That's the real goal.
Those are some lofty goals.
Yeah.
And it sounds like authenticity is a big part of that. I'm getting that. Is that a big part of the way you talk to customers?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've been here for 10 years and I started out acquiring for Audible, so I know how daunting and hard and ultimately rewarding it is to pitch to these people and their ilk. And yes, there's an eternal human hunger for story that our service feeds. And that's the through line, and that's authenticity. And we try always to approach that challenge in an Audible, distinctive way. And that's what makes the job fun.
Beautiful. So as we get into how you talk to listeners, this is what I'm really excited to talk about, because I think there's a lot that ACX creators, authors, and actors can learn from all of the knowledge that you've got built up about how to speak compellingly and authentically to listeners about all of the great content on our site. And then an author can take that and talk about their content that they've got going. So, I mean, just the question, and I'll kick it to you first, Christina, is really, how do you speak to listeners? What's your tone? How do you shape your message so that it's as compelling as it can be?
I think it all starts with knowing your listener and knowing your content. So, speaking about copy on the site, yes. So one of the projects we did last year was to lead stakeholders to write better copy. So your listener, your ideal listener, may know everything about audio or nothing about audio. So the most important thing is to tell that person, what is this title about? And preferably with a hook or just a basic description. And then never to be hyperbolic. Anytime you say something about a title that turns out not to be true or seems exaggerated, you lose trust. And we're all about gaining trust. So it's okay it's okay to stand in your truth. If you're a first-time author and this is your first-time audiobook and you're excited to make your work available in our format, that is a completely legit thing to talk about.
So
when you talk to people.
Don't try and come off like you've been doing this for years if that's not who you are.
Don't try to gild the lily. On the other hand, if you have been a listener for years and you love it, or if this is a continuation of a series, or if you're really excited because you hand cast a narrator, after you have told your hypothetical new best friend listener what is in your book, it's okay to share that authentic detail about your journey to this spot.
And Robin, is it any different from a social perspective?
Yeah, well, we have a lot less time to catch somebody's attention. If they've made it as far as the site, you can assume they're already interested. You've already got them hooked, but we're trying to get people to the site a lot of the time. So when we're crafting things, we think, yes, what is this story about? But we also try to picture who is the story for. Let's be very customer obsessed, customer focused, and think, instead of saying, oh, this is a story about a fishing captain trying to find a big whale, we say, this is for anyone who's ever dreamed of striking out and leaving everything behind in order to chase their ultimate goal. Or some other, think of it that way.
She's talking about Moby Dick.
Yeah, in case you didn't know.
So if Herman Melville is listening now, he knows how to go market.
Yeah,
Moby Dick.
so try to also personify who it's for, because you already wrote the story, you know the plot points, figure out a way to communicate that succinctly and clearly and authentic, but don't forget there's a person on the other end.
Yeah, I love that, the idea of this is a story for somebody who, because that gives the potential customer something they can really connect to more than just another piece of media.
And if I may interrupt, one key piece of that is to be rigorous but loving with your description. So for instance, you can have a thriller with a love story in it. but that does not necessarily make it a romance. Your romance can have an aspirational element that doesn't make it self-dev. It's actually a kindness to people trying to find your book, to our customers, to say what a book is, even though there may be other tropes within the category.
Yeah, please.
Oh, and the hook, like let's not forget the hook. We talk about how we decide, we have only so many words and only so much attention span to hook someone in, right? So when we're talking amongst ourselves on the editorial team, whatever the hook is that thing that we keep saying about it, like in our shorthand, in Hollywood, there's something called the elevator pitch, sort of it's Moby Dick meets Forrest Gump or something like that. Some real shorthand way of saying it that literally in the ride of an elevator, you could explain to someone what its value is and why they should listen to it. So if you have that really short, pithy line that you find you keep saying when you're going out to people kind of talking about your book, that's what should be in your description.
I like it, yeah. And that actually, it sort of leads into my next question, which is how one identifies the hook of a book. If it's a Dr. Seuss. Yeah, exactly. So you gave one great example, which is, I think you just said, if you're all sort of talking about what's drawing you about the book, that is probably naturally the hook. Is there a way for authors that don't necessarily have a lot of colleagues, maybe they're in a solitary, sort of author space, to sort of pull that information out? Is that something they could do on social media, ask their fans perhaps?
Sure, yeah, I think that's a great place to do it. I think something to remember with social, again, is that it is a two-way conversation that includes talking to the people following you and listening to them. So if you are on Twitter and you have done 1,000 posts, but you're following 0 people, why would anyone think that it's some kind of reciprocal relationship?
Seems fake.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, you can put it out to your listeners. You can ask people who read it, what was their favorite parts. You might find out that different people like different things, and maybe it's an opportunity for you to try to market in different areas. I know we had a recent story about a female entrepreneur who broke into an industry she was the first person to do it in her way, and so we marketed it that way to some people. But then to other people, it was also like, oh, she's also a divorced single mom of 2, and how does she juggle it all as a working mom? And maybe those are different ways to talk about the same thing. You don't have to try to, on social media at least, cover all the points in a single post. You could do it over time. And the other great thing about social media is you get instant feedback. If you tweeted about it 2 ways and one post got 10 likes and one post got 0 likes, what did you do in the 10 like post that was different from the 0 like, and how can you replicate it, scale it up? And if no one saw that other tweet and it's a failed experiment, just pretend it never happened.
Never happened.
I like it. 2 hooks for a book. So is it fair to say that a book doesn't necessarily have to have a hook? Is that what I'm getting from you, that depending on your audience?
A singular? No, it's got to you just have to find something that's going to connect to a person.
And that's interesting because it makes me think of what you said earlier in terms of, I guess you've got to thread the needle, right? Be authentic to the book. If it's a thriller with a little bit of romance, don't try to tell people it's a romance, but maybe find the elements that you can talk about within that might be appealing to different segments of your audience. Does that sound right?
Exactly. And that's why one of the things we try to do is find the exact right next suggestion. And what you just said is a big piece of that. I mean, if someone says, that they love, I'm trying to think of a book recently, someone said, I loved this book. And I remember, and all I knew about the book was that it was kind of a procedural, but it was sci-fi and fantasy. So I didn't just pitch them back the next sci-fi and fantasy book.
Interesting.
I had to think of something that had a procedural element. And I think I actually picked The Dispatcher and said, this is shorter than the book that you liked, and it's not in series. But if you're willing to take a risk, this might have the same elements. Whereas, and it turned out to be a successful recommendation, or I wouldn't be telling the story. But usually the way I pitch that book is Zach Quinto narrates, and that's all I need to say.
Right.
So that's an example in real time of how we do this.
Yeah, there absolutely is magic in audio, and I think we're going to get to that a little bit later when we focus on how to talk to audio listeners and such. But you made another really good point. You're full of really good points. I'm not acting surprised,
No, I know.
believe me. I'm
Hence
just sort
the
of
projects in my title.
It makes me think of the idea of authors recommending not just their own books, but books that they like from other authors in maybe similar or adjacent genres.
Yes.
Do we think that there's value in authors putting forth other books, maybe building that
Yes.
larger type library relationship the way that you do?
Yes, rising tide lifts all ships. I think it'd be very important to be collaborative, especially if you're lesser known, building up that community, recommending other people. Because if you're only ever pitching your own stuff, why should I ever trust your recommendation? Whereas if you say, oh, here's this other author's book that I read and I liked, and someone says, oh, I recognize that book, then the next time you make a recommendation, they trust what you said.
Mm-hmm. I have a suggestion. Sorry, I'm just going to tag on to
don't
this,
apologize.
It's something I would love to see people do, to Robin's point. You know, if you're an author, consider reviewing not just your own book on audible.com, but your friends' books too.
Which you should do. That's
Right, so we got to back up a little bit because that was one of your tips that we discussed before this.
So first of all, authors, at a very basic level, if you've written your copy and you want to practice your authenticity, feel free to review your book on our site. I know that authors in general, especially the kind of proactive DIY can-do ACX author, is accustomed to using anything as a platform to talk to your fans. We love that. Use our site. It's okay to review your own title, especially if you say, I'm the author of this book, and here's what I think.
In fact, I would say only if you say, I'm the author of this book. Be very clear that you wrote the book. You're not trying to game the reviews, anything like that.
Absolutely, and that's a place where you can say, where you have the luxury for a moment of becoming a listener and saying, I'm the author of this book, and I loved when the narrator did X, Y, or Z, and I hope you enjoy it.
And
Very
if you want a little
basic way to go for
masterclass,
it.
sorry to interrupt, if you want a masterclass in how to write a review about something you made, go to the classics episode of Addicted. This is like a double plug right here. It's a learning thing
now
for you.
I see why you agreed to sit on the couch. Okay, all right.
The classics episode of Addicted, which Christina appeared on.
I did.
The best written review for Addicted is written by Christina, and she starts it with, which is I think a must-have, you have to do this if you're going to promote your own. If you're going to promote your own content, you say, hi, you wouldn't think that somebody who appears on the show can review the show, but you would be wrong. And then she goes on to do
review the show.
Well. So check that one out if you need it.
Oh, well, thank you. That's really nice. But yes, please, use and that's to Robin's point. So when you review other people's work, again, get your glasses ready. Just be authentic. You can say this person is a friend or not. You can say I became aware of this because we were at a writers' conference together or not. Or you could just say, my narrator is the same narrator for this. Or you can say what I loved about this narrator just without referencing any of that. But a good way to practice authenticity is to write helpful reviews. It's a win-win situation.
Yeah, and again, no matter how much the Audible brand tells you something is worth listening to, people still go to that PDP page and they look at the reviews because they want to know what did other human beings think about this, and then they make the call of whether or not they're going to listen.
And we even raise up the most helpful reviews, right? So it's not just reviews, it's reviews that people really agreed were this is the right one. So there is that community sort of feeling and that authenticity there again. Ching ching.
Yeah, and I'm here to tell you, the Audible listener membership cannot be gamed. They know what they like, they know what they love, they will root out inauthenticity, and you will very quickly see what works and what doesn't when you write for them.
So they can't be gamed, but they can be authentically spoken to and enlightened.
They can be persuaded, they can be charmed, they can be suggested to, but what we love about them is that they're really, really smart and they know a lot about audio and they have their own minds.
So changing topics a little bit, I want to talk about, you touched on earlier about the book description, and you've recently been talking about reviews. How does an author write a compelling book description? Is there something you can pull from the reviews? Should you be altering your description based on the reviews that you see? How can that work?
I think my advice for descriptions is twofold. One is don't overthink it. Cover the basics and your book will sail through. And I'll talk about the basics in a second. But also...
and again, sorry, to be clear, I'm talking about the description on Audible.
Right.
Because we might also go down the track of describing it on social media, but we're talking about on the Audible sales page.
The descriptive copy for your title. I would say... the most important thing is to cover the basics. And so the basics are the hook at the top, if you have one, if it's very short, a description that actually tells listeners what genre the book is in, what category it's in, and then a description of what is the book about. That is one of the main things we know that listeners want from that copy. Then you may feel free, especially if you have something to say, and I think this is really wonderful when authors can do it, to talk about how the performance fits in with the book. You know, the narrator does a great job on the performance. That's where you can put in any awards that people have won. By the way, this is my second piece of advice. Now that you know everything that there is to know about audio and ACX, be kind to our listeners who might not. I would say that the only awards that need to be called out in your book copy are major awards like Grammys and Emmys, maybe an Audie if it's in this genre. Sometimes one of the book genre awards, but for the most part, I think the writing that you do about your title to get a narrator interested is the basis for what you write for customers, but it's not a complete overlap. The most important thing in writing your book copy is to think about yourself before you knew anything about audio and what did you need answered about the book.
I love that.
Give the basics and sign off, and I promise you will have done the right thing.
Is that any different on social media? Let's switch gears and say that we're trying to describe the book either to maybe our fans who might be readers or just somebody who doesn't know your stuff. Is any of that different? Is it just shorter, the same but shorter?
So, yes, not just, but that's part of it. You definitely need to have something that's 280 characters or less. That's the social elevator pitch, right? But something, especially if you're going into audio, and a way to talk to audiobook, to market the audiobook different than an ebook, a lot of people who haven't gotten it, like the audiobook listening experience, they think, gosh, when would I ever have time to listen? But then you talk to our most passionate Audible members and they're like, when am I ever not listening, right? So one of the things that we strive to do on the Audible social channels is we really try to highlight and promote what we call the listening lifestyle. And that's, did you know you could be listening while you are waiting for the train, let alone on the train, or while you're walking to work? Did you know you could be listening while you're folding laundry? Did you know you could be listening on an Alexa device at home with your kids at bedtime? There's plenty of ways to listen that people don't realize until they get it. So maybe that's a way when you're marketing your book on social media, you could say, again, speak to your own experience as a listener and say, gosh, I was just listening to the latest blah, blah, blah from so-and-so who's a friend of mine, and I couldn't pause it. I sat in the car for an extra 15 minutes just so I could finish this chapter.
Right.
Speak to how you are a listener, show people how they could be listening, especially because a lot of people say audiobooks let them get in more books in their life. So if you have super fans, say this is another way that you could be listening and getting more stories in your life.
I love that, and I guess I represent the side of that equation of people that listen, that say they listen all the time, because you're saying, oh, well, not just listen on the train, but listen on the way to the train. I'm like, as soon as my door closes to my apartment, I'm listening, I'm firing something up. So I think once you're hooked on that audio, you're just in. I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yep.
So before somebody's going to listen, as much as they love listening, before they're going to listen to your book, it's got to catch your eye and it's got to catch your ear.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Courtney, what will make a book catch your eye or ear? Anything about the book, from cover art to sample to description, like what is it that grabs you about an audiobook? I
mean, as I've said, and I'm biased, I think getting a recommendation from another human is the most important thing. So I mean, I'll admit most of the things I listen to have been recommended to me by someone else. But if I am browsing and haven't been told, or I'm given a list, a curated list, or a newsletter, yes, it'll be the title. Yes, it will be the art. But I always do go and listen to the sample.
Okay.
So I do think that the narration is super important. So be sure you pick the one that fits your work, because you can tell. I won't name names, but there is a recent book that I really, really wanted to listen to, but the narrator was mismatched.
Yeah.
And so I'm not listening to it when I would be otherwise.
I see. And so you said yes, the title, yes, the title. Once you're in audio, you've got your book title, right?
Sure.
Not much you can do about that. But you said yes, the cover. Anything specific about the cover? Is it just make sure it looks professional, or is there anything we know about an audio cover or a cover that is like a big do or a big don't?
I mean, if you really want to get super technical, what we do when we're looking at covers, and even when we're choosing which ones to include in our newsletters to our subscribers, can you read it at this resolution? can you, like, is there a bunch of extra font there that's the subtitle that I have? So that sometimes will get it rejected.
And this resolution is probably mobile? Is that like kind of what we're looking at?
Correct. I mean, we look at everything from desktop to mobile, and we consider that, like, okay, is the image alone enough? I'll use an example. There's a new Audible original coming out called A Certain Hunger. Okay. And there's an elevator pitch for this. It's like American Psycho meets Jeffrey Dahmer, which sounds great, doesn't it? But but with romance. I don't know. But it's a woman who eats her significant others. All right.
Okay.
So the cover, you kind of want people to know that up front. You don't want them to be
a surprise.
You don't want them to be surprised when
You
they
don't
get
want them
this.
to think it's just a regular romance, and then there's cannibalism in it.
This may not be the listen for everyone, which is exactly why when I saw I kind of gasped. It's like somebody serving you a platter with a human heart on it.
Very
and I was like, whoa!
Right.
But actually, and I was talking to our originals team, and they were like, we did that on purpose because we want that shock value to be up front because it is a shocking title.
And a praying mantis would have been way too subtle.
Right, exactly.
I know.
But also you could see it said A Certain Hunger and the author at a small resolution.
Okay.
There was another one. We opted not to include that because of the shock value, and this went to a wide audience. But there was one that didn't make the cut because I have no idea what that says.
Right.
So
and if you've got a whole list of books to scroll through as a listener, you're probably not going to take the time to sort of click through or drill down.
People assume a lot that people have time and interest to stop and look at something. You have to stop them.
You
oh
gotta
my
grab
gosh,
them.
welcome to social. If you think about it, A, mobile first, yes. B, constant scroll. People on mobile devices are spending less than a second on each post that they go by. So if you're trying to communicate to people on social media, you need something that is going to get them to put their finger down and stop scrolling. What that means for most people and most platforms is you are going to need some kind of a visual. Even though we are an audio company, you have to get someone's attention, especially if they're on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. They're not in an audio first space. If they're going to Audible, again, they're on that product detail page, they're going to click to play the sample because they're choosing to get more information. Right now, you are fighting for attention with all of their friends, all of their family, all the cute dog accounts that they follow, the brand that they want to see the latest sale front. It's noisy. So think of something that is going to stop them, that it will stop them at a small scale. And then to get them to listen to your sample, you need to tell them, sound on to hear this amazing delivery from my narrator who is doing a phenomenal job in embodying this character. Don't assume that people are going to have the volume on. If you are making some sort of a video asset, caption it. Again, if you stop and get their attention, and then when they're compelled, they're going to turn the sound on to listen, but don't assume that they have the sound on to start.
Lead them, hold their hand, get them there.
Yes.
If your goal is to sell the book, do what you got to do.
Exactly.
Christina, anything just from a personal perspective that really, as a voracious listener, makes you want to listen that could be replicated by ACX creators?
I follow narrators. I read a lot and I read authors, but my listening is determined almost entirely by narrators.
Really?
Plus also, if you can get your narrator involved, and I know that they, and I'm not just talking about marketing, say something about your narrator.
Right.
Tweet out about your narrator. They are the performer. That, I think, is a very valuable tactic. And my final thing that I often joke with authors, because I come out of the side where I know them, is, take everything we say and run with it. The way to charm the Audible editors is not to send us a bouquet of roses. It's to keep your own rose bushes pruned. We care. The things you do for customers will lead to discovery and endear your title to us.
Right. I love that's such an evocative metaphor.
Yeah,
I love
we
that.
just want we just want all the books to look great.
Well, I love to hear that you follow narrators, because I do the same thing. I will often, maybe even more than authors, I will often, if I just hear a book that I like, I'm definitely clicking on that narrator's name on Audible to see what else they've done. Now, I'm only probably going to pick something that, for me, makes sense for me that I would listen to. I'm not going to go listen to some steamy romance book just because I really love the narrator, but there is author hopping and there is narrator hopping on Audible.
No, I've listened to things that people cannot believe I've listened to because a narrator I love. I devoured Calculating God because Jonathan Davis was the narrator.
Jonathan Davis is a great narrator.
And when you ask me what my favorite book is, I'll tell you Kristen Lavren's Daughter. You know, so like I will follow the narrator almost anywhere. I have a not so secret penchant these days for, you know, stepbrother romances because I love some of the dual narration coming out of there. So,
yeah. I think also on social, I think most customers assume the writer and the narrator are in a room together and that the writer told you how to perform this character or said this is how you pronounce this person's name. I say, why shatter that illusion? Because again, it seems very authentic to have two people, human beings, working together on a thing. So if your narrator is on social, why not tag them in something? Why not start a conversation with them? They retweet you, they add on to it, you retweet them, they add on to yours. Again, building that authenticity with people.
throw them a compliment.
Yeah.
I mean, they're actors.
Yeah,
Tell them
and-
you like their work.
And I think the acting and the narration is really what separates this art form apart.
Yes.
And we often tell authors, like, you know, they'll ask us, how do I talk about audio? Well, audio, focus on the audio, like focus on the book as well, but the audio is what really makes it special, that performance laid over elevating the
Story.
artwork of the story. So I think we're all in agreement there. As we sort of bring the plane in for the landing and come in towards our last couple of questions, I want to focus for a little bit on the wider world of entertainment and thinking of like TV and movie. Is there anything that can be learned? Is there anything that can be learned from the way we're seeing TVs and movies advertised, talked about? Is there overlap in terms of like audiobooks and TV movie in any way, shape, or form?
Well, we have these presentations by the big 5 publishers come in, and they'll give us their slate of the upcoming books, and we always do a little trend spotting in that. And I think we've been noticing more and more, oh, how interesting, true crime is now being woven into mysteries and thrillers a lot more because of the boom in true crime, both on what you watch and what you listen to elsewhere. When you're in your other travels of entertainment, you know, if you start to see micro genres pop up, think about that and referencing that maybe when you're talking about your own work.
If you liked X, you might like Y.
Right, correct. And if you may have not even thought of it in that genre, but now you're seeing that that's a genre trend happening, and you go, oh wait, that's what my book does that. Use that language when you're talking about it.
I love
so
that.
you're part of the larger zeitgeist.
Tying it to, again, this is a story about, right? Tying it to something people know.
Yeah.
Robin was pointing over towards Christina.
Christina said something in our earlier about sort of right to be bingeable.
Yeah, I feel like I don't watch TV anymore. I just stream shows until I'm catatonic on the sofa. So I think that's an opportunity for authors with a series to make sure that the series is bingeable. Is the series consistently great? Did you invest in the series? Am I going, is it the equivalent of chain smoking your titles for me to roll the next one as soon as I'm done? I think that bingeability is a power, to be bingeable is a powerful tactic that we have gotten from streaming video and audio, video and movies.
Yeah. And I think that that's why series are such a good idea, and that's why series can do so well, and you'll see, hopefully if it's well written and performed, good sell-through. And we often try to compel authors to maybe put like a teaser chapter at the end of book 1, put a little cliffhanger, maybe the first chapter of book 2, and that way, it happened to me once with an ACX author where I didn't realize it was happening, and then I listened to the end of the book and plus a little bit more, and then wait, what happened? I don't get this. And I went and got the next book because I had no choice.
If there's a pre-order, tell people about the pre-order. One of the most basic things you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to bring it around for what I think is our last question, I just want to sort of distill everything down if I can. Maybe this is a bit of a challenge, and it's okay to sort of bring up a point that you've already touched on, right? But if you have one piece of advice, and I already know, I think I know what you're going to say, but if you have one piece of advice for an author who's watching this, one takeaway to say, I'm going to go and do this from now on, what would it be?
Boy, one piece of advice. Look at other things on Audible and see what draws you in. And don't necessarily copy it, but learn from it and be inspired. If there's a turn of phrase that you like, they used a lot of verbs instead of nouns, or there was a way that they quoted someone who listened to it and what they had to say about it. Just really immerse yourself in what else is available there and see how it inspires you.
I like that. Take some notes as you're going through about what you like and what you don't. Robin?
Well, it's similar to that of sort of paying attention and doing some research is, again, be a listener as much as you are a writer, and that can be literally listen to your own book so you can write an honest review of it. And then also on, again, social media, it's conversation. It's about listening. It's not just about shouting out and then ignoring any feedback that you're getting. So if someone replies back to you, reply back to their reply, or at least like it or acknowledge it. Thank people. Talk to your narrator. On Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, wherever you are, don't be too pushy, but don't only talk about your own self the whole time. That's boring. Nobody wants to invite that guy to the party. You want someone who's going to listen to you, and that you, again, build that trust so that if I recommend other people's things or I'm paying attention to what you're giving me, then when I then use my leverage to market something to you, you're going to trust what I say, and then you're going to take action.
The experts in audio, which may be us and maybe other people, know more about the population of titles and the population of listeners than an author ever will. But an author knows knows their own book better than the experts ever will. So the real heart of authenticity is, despite all the noise around you as an author, for you to know those moments in your work that are special to you, that you loved writing, that you loved talking about, that you think will pull people in. And that's always the touchstone. That's where you go when you need to talk about your book. And that is authentic.
I think that's a great piece of advice, Christina. Thanks a lot. And thank you all at home for watching. I hope you learned a ton about some of the inner workings of how we've learned to talk to listeners and how you can take that home and use it in your own audiobook marketing tactics. Thanks so much to Courtney and Robin and Christina for joining me today. Thank you for watching.